Palworld, a game marketed as Pokemon but with guns, is going wild and selling millions of copies. But the question is, this game looks eerily similar to Pokemon. So can Pokemon file a suit against Palworld to defend their intellectual property? The answer to that is yes. We're going to explain today on The Legal Mindset. So what is Palworld? It's actually not a game that's very much in gameplay like Pokemon. Pokemon, you go through a fairly linear path, you engage in turn-based battles, you go to gyms, you beat certain bosses, and each game in the series of Pokemon is pretty much structurally, and even in terms of story, very much similar to the last. But Palworld is actually more similar to survival-type games, such as Minecraft, Rust, Ark, those sort of games where you might be crafting, building in a world, but also you've got these characters, you've got these pals that are, well, as they say, Pokemon with guns. And this is where it is becoming wildly popular because that survival genre is still intensely popular, particularly on platforms such as Steam. Currently, it is the reigning champion for current users on Steam and reaching peaks of over 1.5 million. In fact, it's challenging the top all-time peak levels at 1.58 million, only to come in third under Counter-Strike and PUBG Battlegrounds. So it's quickly rising in the ranks and becoming more and more popular on these online platforms. Now, what are the concerns about IP? Let's start with the basics of intellectual property. There are three specific types of intellectual property or IP rights that are generally protected around the globe. Those include patent rights, trademark, and copyright. Let's start with patents. Patents are generally given for products or processes that are forming a part of a technical innovation. These are inventions. These are new creations. Think of the steam engine or something of that sort. That is something that you might have a patent on. Now, there are allegations that Palworld used AI in the creation of many of its monsters and many of its scenarios. However, they're certainly not the people to pioneer AI or create the technical process behind AI. So the question of patent is really irrelevant here and wouldn't be the basis for which Pokemon sues Palworld. However, Pokemon may have a case with trademark and copyright. Trademark involves a distinguished brand, something that if people saw this brand, they would think of your company. Think of the golden arches with McDonald's. And certainly for Pokemon, Pikachu. Pikachu is absolutely a trademark of Nintendo. So if you look at Pikachu, you would think Nintendo. But in addition to trademark, there's copyright. Copyright, to put it very simply, and listen, I'm an American attorney, but I still like to keep things simple. The simplest way to think of copyright is literally the right to copy. Who has the ability to copy something and who does not? There are, of course, people who are authorized to do that, and there are exceptions which allow you to copy things in a permissible manner, such as fair use. Now, fair use isn't available in all countries. However, it's one of those defenses that comes along with copyright. And there are cases in which infringing on something, let's say using Pikachu, might offend both trademark and copyright at the same time. But there's other cases where, for example, you might violate trademark but not copyright. Disney is trying to argue that use of certain versions of Mickey Mouse, now that Steamboat Willie has gone into the public domain, are actually violative of trademark but not of copyright because it's in the public domain for copyright but not for trademark. It can get confusing, but understand that Pokemon in their suit would make a case under both copyright and trademark. But with that, let's get to Palworld's defenses. there are 4 general defenses that are going to come up big for Palworld in a fight against a Pokemon lawsuit. Number 1, you cannot have intellectual property rights and ideas and concepts. So for example, you cannot have intellectual property rights in steampunk. You can't have intellectual property rights in horror. And you also can't have intellectual property rights in capturing, battling, and fighting with monsters. That's simply not something you can lock down. So the Pokemon Company is not able to say, hey, look, we own the idea of capturing monsters. We own the idea of battling monsters. That's not something that's going to fly. And many other games have used monster taming or monster battle elements. I think most popularly or famously would be Monster Hunter. And certainly Pokemon would have no claim against Monster Hunter in that case. But further, they can argue that it is a distinct game. The crafting elements, the world building, it's so much different than Pokemon. And also, there's the big difference of weapons, of guns, of all sorts of things that are not in Pokemon at all, because Pokemon is more geared towards children, whereas Palworld comes off as an all-ages game because of that element. It comes off as something that has appeal to kids, adults, teens, streamers, because it has so many fun elements, so there's a broader appeal there. And even if there was more similarities that are found between Palworld and Pokemon, they can say, hey, look, this is not something where we're copying it one for one. We've changed the designs. We've changed things up. And for most standards, they look at, does this have a modicum of creativity? Does this have a level of creativity to distinguish it from the original? And certainly, while there are many designs that look similar to Pokemon, there are distinctions. And there are also distinctions in the design of the game itself as open world, which just really takes it out of the context of Pokemon. But last, and perhaps one of the strongest defenses, which I know everyone's going to say, Andrew, you're a lawyer, this is not a legal defense, but it's a practical defense, is that this game is very popular. The insane popularity of Palworld certainly is something that doesn't go unnoticed. Doesn't go unnoticed by judges. It doesn't go unnoticed by the media. And when you have a strong backing in the public eye, in the media, that certainly can help you in the court. The courtroom, the boardroom, the newsroom, these things are incredibly linked in our modern day and age. And to try to take that out of the picture is really a little bit ignorant. And this is where Palworld has gained a lot of love, because people are really loving Palworld and are loving playing and engaging with Palworld. And because of that, they have a strong defense there. Not taking sides, pro or con in Palworld here, just to be very clear. I'm just saying that a lot of people love this game. But that is not going to stop Pokemon from suing, and Pokemon has a lot of points that can overcome those defenses. There are 3 main factors that would hurt Palworld and help Pokemon when they are countering, when they are trying to press this suit and counter the defenses of Palworld. Number 1, it's those designs, guys. Come on. When we're looking at the designs, now some of them are completely unique, some of them are completely new, but so many of them are just right on the nose. And people have put together compilations showing exactly how similar these things are, exactly how similar the Pokemon are to the Pals, and it's just uncanny in some cases. Like they were expressly telling them, hey, go out there and copy this specific Pokemon. Go out there and copy that. And if there was proof, if there was discovery, which is investigative materials, emails, letters, calls, other information that could be discovered in court, that found out that they were willfully and intentionally one-for-one copying Pokemon, yeah, that would weigh in favor of Nintendo, Game Freak. Those would be enforcing the copyright or intellectual property in regards to Pokemon. Number 2 is there's no fair use defense. Now, this is something that is clearly commercial. This is something that is not educational. It's not parody. It's not charitable. They are making money on this. In fact, they made a lot of money, and based on the fact they only had a $6.75 million budget when most AAA games have a 20x budget, they might deserve Game of the Year just for getting so much done on such a small budget with such a small development team. They only spent about 1 billion yen, 6.75 million, whereas most games, I mean, you're talking for a AAA game, something 100 million, 200 million, even 300 million for some of the top end games. So, I mean, they deserve credit there, but that doesn't help them for fair use. That doesn't help them in a fair use defense. And the other part of fair use defense is it's not really as big of a thing in Japan. And I know, why are you mentioning Japanese law? Well, that's point number 3. Japanese law is different. Now, full disclaimer, I am an American attorney, not a Japanese lawyer. So I do not attest to be an expert, to be a sensei of Japanese law. However, for the purposes of this, I did look into it. And as someone who lives in Asia, I spent a significant amount of time in Japan, as well as Korea, Thailand. This is something that is of interest to me. And I look at these things on a pretty regular basis, including catching up for this. So in Japan, copyright law is mostly similar to America, is mostly similar around the world, but there's certain things that are not as straightforward. Fair use defense is one of them. Another thing is that defense of ideas, the protection of ideas over specific concepts, that line is not there. They're not specifically exempted. So that exemption that exists in statutes in America does not exist in Japan. They've actually got case law that says something similar, but they've got to go to trial to prove it. So what does this all mean? What's the end result? Well, I do think that many YouTube creators have ran out there and made conclusions that this is legal and Palworld is totally defensible and legally they totally owned Pokemon. They totally will win. But I think that is a very, very hasty conclusion. And no doubt many of these folks, in fact, almost all of these folks, are not lawyers that are looking at this with a lawyer's eye. And when one looks at this with a lawyer's eye, you can see that they have a case. They are able to sue. And oftentimes, suing is all you need to do. As long as you're able to sue and get past a motion to dismiss, that initial motion to get rid of the case, to get rid of the lawsuit, you actually end up winning, because most cases settle on or before summary judgment, on or before trial. So you're getting a settlement and you're often settling these things out. One of the most famous cases is Star Wars versus Battlestar Galactica. In that case, you saw Star Wars sue Battlestar Galactica for similarity with many generic traits, a totalitarian empire, a heroine, a hero, very generic traits and ideas. Now, one would think, well, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, oh, they're totally distinct. Well, the court actually said, well, you know what? There's actually facts here that could lead you to believe that one might have been influenced by the other, and there might be a case here for Star Wars. So they were going to send this to trial. But that case ultimately ended up being settled before trial. And now we have a day when Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica are clearly distinct based on subsequent things that have come out. But what was the important part? The important part was the settlement. The important part is the case. If Pokemon was able to win a case, win a settlement against Palworld, that would be huge. I don't think that would stop Palworld from operating. I don't think that would stop it as a game. Don't think that would take it offline necessarily, but it could help make them some money when Game Freak has really been struggling with making games that seem to be as innovative and going for as much bang for the buck as Palworld. What do you guys think? Do you guys think there's a possible case here? Do you like this analysis? Let me know in the comments below. Please make sure to smash the like button, and I will catch you on the next one.